Hi, everyone, and welcome to DAS Health webinar, Windows Server 2012 End of Life, What's Next for Your IT Infrastructure. My name is Lindsay Lanning, and I lead our government incentives team at DAS Health. Now, before I get started, I would like to take a moment to explain the process for today's presentation. First, I'd like to mention this webinar will be recorded, and we'll send out a copy of the slides and recording within the next week. Next, for those of you who aren't familiar with DAS Health, we offer a wide range of solutions to support our clients' growth and seamless operations with over 25,000 providers supported and over 30,000 endpoints managed. We are a trusted healthcare IT partner to many. Now, at DAS, we do offer, like I said, a wide array of solutions to better support your practice. So that can be anything from cybersecurity, hosting, managed IT services, consulting. We've got lifecycle management, patient engagement solutions like chronic care management and remote patient monitoring, and even MIPS reporting assistance. All right, well, back to today's webinar. At the end of the presentation, we're going to open up the floor to questions from you. We will answer all questions either at the end or during our expert panel portion of the webinar, but you may type them in the questions area of the webinar control panel whenever they occur to you. Finally, for audio clarity purposes, everyone's phone will remain muted throughout the entire webinar. If you experience any audio issues, again, please use the chat box to let us know so we can try and help you resolve them. And again, questions may be entered in the questions box. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce my co-presenters for today. Mark McLaughlin, our Director of MSP Pro Solutions, and Nick DeMeo from our cybersecurity team. Both Mark and Nick have been working in the healthcare IT industry for years and bring that real life experience and expertise to our organization, and lucky for us, to today's webinar. Now, before we get started, I wanted to give you an idea of what we're going to cover today. So first up is the who, what, when, and how regarding the Windows Server 2012 end of life, to make sure we're all on the same page right from the beginning. I'm then going to turn it over to Nick to further explore the impact to physician practices and what this could mean both from a security standpoint and a business operations standpoint. Mark will then review what your options are for mitigation and transitioning off an end-of-life server, as each practice is very unique and what we recommend and what your options are. We will then close out with our expert panel here to answer any questions from you, as well as questions we've already received from our own clients this year to make sure we don't leave any stone unturned when it comes to end-of-life servers. Now, first off, to really understand our audience just a little bit better, I'm going to launch a poll just to gauge where we're at. So let me go ahead and launch that for you all. Perfect. That should be open for you. Really before we even cover any information, are you aware of the risk an end-of-life server poses to your organization? Your options are yes, no, and my personal favorite, I don't even know what an end-of-life server means. And if that's the case, totally fine. That's why you're here. You've come to the right place. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and keep collecting those answers for just a few more seconds. So if you want to pop over and hit that yes, no, or I don't know what an end-of-life server means. Awesome. We've got some trickling in here, and I'm going to go ahead and close that out in 3, 2, 1. Perfect. And I can go ahead and share these poll results here. Kind of wild, Mark, Nick. We've got some people on the line who know what's going on with these servers, right? Now, I will say for the yeses, I do think you're going to be pleasantly, I guess, or I should say maybe unpleasantly surprised at all the different impacts this could actually have on a practice. I swear just when I thought I knew them all, Mark or Nick would mention something else to consider. Again, no options, I said. If there are any and maybe you didn't feel comfortable answering, that is no problem. Like I said, you're in the right place. Our goal is for everyone to walk away from this presentation today to be able to answer yes to this question. Okay, so introductions and agendas aside, let's really get started with the who, what, when, and how of End of Life Server 2012. First up, what is it? Well, Windows Server 2012 is an operating system developed by Microsoft for servers and data centers. And to put it frankly, the end of the life cycle refers to the point in time when Microsoft officially ceases to provide support and updates for this operating system. Again, so pretty straightforward, but starting out with the absolute basics here. Next up, another what question. What does this mean exactly? Well, once a product is end of life, there are no more updates. That means no more security updates, patches, or bug fixes are going to be released or provided by Microsoft. This, in turn, leads to increased security risks, right? Without updates, the operating system becomes vulnerable to any of those new security threats and will likely be exploited. This is then a domino effect and will lead to compliance challenges, especially with regulations like, HIPAA for one. And then there are also compatibility issues to consider, since new hardware or software soon won't be able to function with this outdated software. And then, of course, performance issues, which can lead to downtime or productivity loss due to things like slowness. The next logical question, now that we know what end of life means, is when is this happening? And well, the bad news is it already has. The official end of support for Windows Server 2012 occurred just over a month ago on October 10th, 2023. So this means, again, Microsoft is no longer providing updates for or patching this operating system after that date. Now, the who. Who does this impact? Honestly, anyone on a Windows 2012 server, right? It doesn't just have to be healthcare, but medical practices in particular have consequences that could impact patient care or leave patient health information at risk and need to be especially aware of this. And now you might be wondering, Lindsay, how did this happen? I started my day off, the sun was shining, without a care in the world, and now I'm stressed. Well, again, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but this is actually not a surprise. The end of life Windows Server 2012 was a planned phase in the product's lifecycle as per Microsoft's standard policy. Again, we know it marked the end of that official support and updates for the operating system. And to be honest with you, customers were advised to upgrade to newer versions to ensure that security, compliance, and continued operational stability. So again, this phase is a standard part of Microsoft's product management strategy, ensuring that customers, clients stay up to date with the latest technology and security features. My goodness, I'm losing it. Now, I would say what I'm equating this to is it's very similar to our iPhones that we have, right? We all get that notification there's an update available. And to make sure we plug in our phone that night so we can get that pesky red notification bubble off our screen. Same idea here, right? There are newer operating systems that should be in use to stay secure and optimize performance. So now that we have your attention and we're all on equal footing relatively in regards to this whole end of life ordeal, I'm going to turn over to Nick to take us through the impact it can have on your practice if you stay on a 2012 server. So Nick, it is all yours.
Thanks, Lindsay. I appreciate that great introduction. And as Lindsay mentioned, there is really two main focuses of today when we're talking about end-of-life servers, specifically Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2, is there is a security impact, and then there's also the business impact. Those can be related, they can be chained together, or they can be separate issues. So we'd like to go ahead and jump in and start really getting into the key issues and consequences. So the main focus from a cybersecurity standpoint is going to be vulnerabilities without the security updates, which is going to lead an increase in potential threats, and which is also going to create or increase the potential risk to healthcare data and patient information. And you will see as we go through the information on how one leads to another, and how multiple things can be chained together to create a really bad day. Or on the opposite side of chaining a whole lot of controls and mitigations together can create a very less stressful day. And that's what we're going to go into. Because we are healthcare focused, we are going to jump into the issues and compliance regarding specifically to HIPAA. So we do have a security rule here, and this is referencing the HIPAA mandate that all organizations must implement procedures for detecting, guarding against, and reporting malicious software. And the reason why an end-of-life server can put this at risk, which we're going to explain a little bit more further out, but if you are using something that can no longer detect or report properly, then you may be entering territory of having some compliance issues that need to get corrected. And obviously, we all understand what HIPAA is, and some things are just, hey, you need to get this fixed. And then we're going to cover next on how some of these things can actually lead to fines or legal actions. And again, I don't want anybody to think that we're saying, hey, if you don't get this replaced right now, you're going to get fined by the government. That's not what we're saying. But we do want to highlight there is a risk when we are talking about not just HIPAA compliance, but any type of compliance standard. And what I mean by that is when we're looking at the description here of tier number 1, and they use a term called due diligence. This is a very important keyword to think about because nobody is perfect. There isn't a point where you could do A, B, and C and still have an issue. However, if somebody from an agency or compliance or a legal side is coming in looking, and you're able to prove that you are performing due diligence to protect sensitive data, you are looking at a far less issue or a bad day than if you are unable to prove due diligence. And when you're not able to prove your due diligence, not to keep using the same word, this can actually transition or to be perceived as negligence. And that's when things can really get really bad, from bad to worse, and a high impact on the business if you are being viewed that you're negligently handling sensitive data. And again, we're not saying this is a, if you don't upgrade your server right now, you're negligent. However, as things progress through the end of the year and next year, and I'll talk about that real soon, you can see how things can get perceived that way due to the security risk involved of operating end of life. All right, so before we really jump into specifically about end of life, I do want to highlight what we kind of call a gateway to cybersecurity attacks. This is kind of a joke from the community, playing the gateway drug. However, it's not funny because unfortunately, a lot of businesses, especially in healthcare, get affected by this every single day. And I want to highlight the top causes for attacks, like ransomware. Now, these are derived from businesses that have reported anonymously that unfortunately did experience a cyber breach or a data breach or ransomware. They do submit data voluntarily to cybersecurity watchdogs, or those watchdogs reach out and collect the information. These organizations are not named, but they do provide essentially the breaking point. As this is what the threat actor, this is how they gained access to our system, or this was really what started the ransomware attack, was this issue right here. These can move up and down on the list. They're not necessarily in order, except for the very first bullet point, which is phishing emails and social engineering. This has been the top cause for ransomware for a few years in a row now. Because of the low cost and also the ease of exploiting the human factor, this probably will not lose its spot for quite some time. It's going to continue to stay number one because of its cost effective and also efficient from an attacker's point of view. Next, we're going to go unpatched systems and software. So this is where it really hits home when we're referring to end of life, because if you are unable to patch or update your software, you're already looking at one of the top 5 causes of ransomware. And that just kind of tells everybody right off the bat, hey, this needs to get prioritized correctly. Out-of-date security tools. This is referencing like your antivirus, which today we kind of call endpoint detection and response. It's much more robust and offers additional security features than a legacy or standard antivirus does, and also your firewalls. And the reason why this is actually directly affected by end of life is because security vendors are not going to waste time or resources trying to protect something like Windows Server when Microsoft is no longer even supporting it. It's just from a business standpoint, they're not going to put resources aside to continue updating and protecting those. So now, right off the bat of maintaining an end-of-life server, you already have 2 major causes of ransomware attacks on the books. And that's why we are having this webinar, is to really hope everybody understands there is a great deal of risk from a security standpoint, not just from the business as well. And I'll go through the next ones real quick. Lack of security awareness training. I'm really big on security awareness training. Actually, Verizon Security did a 2023 study, and they actually saw a 60% reduction in compromised email accounts when there was a formal security awareness training in place. So that's a huge reduction. That's a really good return on investment. And this can actually help identify everything on this list. If you and your staff are aware of the risks, you're going to change your habits and have a really good cybersecurity hygiene throughout the organization. Next is misconfigurations or human error. And this actually can lead to multiple things. For instance, this could lead to having an unsecured remote access program. Remote desktop protocol is built into Windows desktops and servers. This is a very common thing that gets exploited. When I originally went to college for cybersecurity, that was something every single instructor said, like, as soon as you get into an environment, disable RDP, disable RDP. That's what I heard for my entire college program for cybersecurity, was that over and over. And that is because it has time and time again been exploited by hackers to get into your organization. And finally, end-of-life hardware or firmware. Now, these refer more to physical devices. So this device can host your Windows Server 2012, or it could be your printer. It could be an outdated router or firewall. Printers specifically, there was a time a couple years ago where that was a common indicator of a compromise, is that your printers were acting up. Calling, IT help desk and say, hey, our printers are going crazy. They're printing off everything from the share drive. And, it kind of got looked as a glitch or user error. And then 2 hours later, the systems were completely encrypted. So it is important to analyze, what you have in your network. And if you are having or maintaining end of life, prioritize getting those replaced as soon as possible. All right, so now we are going to look at the path of least resistance. Now, this is unfortunately not for the business. This is actually the least resistance for the attacker. And they are going to go after the easiest target they can to maximize their time and their profit. Because the majority of hackers are not doing this for free or just for fun. They're doing it because it is a multi-billion-dollar business. There's actually companies, ransomware companies, they have full-on product support for hackers and for victims that will help and walk individuals through, organizations through, on how to remediate ransomware, of course, as long as they pay that massive Bitcoin monetary value first. But the very #1 bullet, I highlighted a keyword called known vulnerabilities and flaws, will not receive fixes or security patches. Known vulnerabilities is something that is extremely crucial to remember and to always have on your mind, because it's 2 things. #1, Microsoft has an obligation to publicly report and release vulnerabilities in their systems, whether it's end of life or active. They have to do this, and it gets posted on their security advisory website for the entire internet to see. and all of the cybersecurity news weekly. They love when Microsoft releases vulnerabilities because it gives them something to talk about. And then within a few days, it's pretty much known throughout the cybersecurity community. And also the dark side of that with threat actors and cyber criminals. They're also going to be aware. The second part of being known is now that it's known, what comes after now is publicly information or almost instructional blogs and videos on how to exploit these vulnerabilities. This is where it gets really dangerous. And one thing that's always been a struggle for cybersecurity professionals like myself is hackers are really good at sharing information. If you look at a celebrity, they charge thousands of dollars for a masterclass. The top hackers do it for free. They have no problem teaching somebody how to exploit a vulnerability without any cost. They enjoy doing it. And this creates a very dangerous environment because now the vulnerability is known. And now how to actually step-by-step exploit that vulnerability is also being published online, whether it's a dark web forum or YouTube. It could be anywhere. And there's tons of these videos. Some of these individuals mean well. They're explaining this from an educational perspective. However, you'll find in security that most things that can be used for good can also be used for bad. So it is to keep in mind to prioritize when you have end of life Windows Server or any device that known vulnerabilities, it's only a matter of time before exploitation comes next. Now, we touched a little bit on security protection software. And as I mentioned before, this gets really dangerous because if you're relying on a product to protect your servers, to prevent virus infections or malware or unauthorized connections, and you're maintaining something end of life, and then your security tool says, hey, you know what, I'm sorry, we're not gonna protect this. Or if you notice there's an issue and they're gonna go, yeah, we understand that issue is there. However, we don't support end of life software. Therefore, we recommend you upgrade. And unfortunately, that's something you're gonna hear quite a bit when you're troubleshooting anything that's end of life, is they're kind of just gonna tell you to upgrade because they don't wanna spend any time or resources trying to fix something that they no longer deem worthy or safe to use in an organization. And when you have these two known vulnerabilities and your security protection software, it may not support it, this is going to lead to an increase in attacks. As I said before, it's just about the path of least resistance. This is how hackers choose their targets when they're initially doing their reconnaissance on any organization and they're doing vulnerability scans. They are not going to waste hours or weeks trying to break into a very secure system when this organization over here has end-of-life servers that has a slew of vulnerabilities publicly published. That's what they're going to go after. So we are expecting over the next 6 months to the year that anybody maintaining these end-of-life servers, it's only going to take about one really good critical vulnerability to be released by Microsoft to see a massive increase in specialized targets. And it's, like I said, they do share information. So once somebody gets a really good payload to deploy to attack an organization, all these hackers and threat actors, they're all going to be using it, and it becomes very dangerous. And finally, just looking at the server itself with the built-in security features, these become obsolete. And now this isn't something that is really to blame on anybody or anybody's really at fault. This is just because technology ages, especially in the IT world. Things age every 2 to 3 years, something can be outdated. So things evolve very fast. So something that is viewed as very secure today, next year may be labeled as deprecated and unsecure. And unfortunately, that's just the way things are with the way technology grows and advances. And one key thing to point out is you don't want security features becoming obsolete or no longer viewed as acceptable, because then when you have sensitive data being shared or in transit or stored on these servers, you're no longer able to guarantee that data at rest is secured. And that is something specifically from HIPAA. They do require that data at rest is protected through encryption. or through some other control. And also data in transit also needs to be protected or encrypted. Preferably and recommended, it's always encrypted. However, those are two key points, is that data at rest and data in transit always are protected. So if your server is no longer able to provide that to meet today's security standards, that's another way where you could be really looking at an issue with compliance. All right, so we are going to look at some of the very specific cybersecurity risks. So this happened here in 2023, and I don't expect anybody to look at this and have any idea what it means. That's okay. What's really important is that DAS has a full cybersecurity team here, and we completely understand and we are well aware of what these tools are and these exploits. And that's a really benefit of DAS offering all these services, is that we can really offload stress and also provide expertise on a multitude of things that you yourself really just doesn't have time to really go out and learn for yourself. I'm going to run through these real quick. However, I do want to take a point to really focus on about 3 of these because they are quite dangerous and very prevalent. The number one is Cobalt Strike. Backdoor. Cobalt Strike is a tool that was created and it is sold to help cybersecurity professionals test their organization's security controls. It is an expensive tool. Once the initial training and education on the tool is completed, it pretty much runs itself. So this is actually one of the main tools used by hackers to actually deploy ransomware. As I said before, things that are meant for good are often used for bad as well. And we saw with Windows 7, Server 2008, and Server 2012 here in 2023, Cobalt Strike was heavily used to steal data and also deploy ransomware. And essentially how it works is once a hacker, they put together their own automated playbook, and then they load it into Cobalt Strike, they hit play, they go get coffee, they go watch a movie, and the tool essentially attacks your organization for them, and then they come back and collect the reward. So it's a very powerful and dangerous tool that is often used. Metasploit framework, this is very powerful as well. The danger of this is it doesn't cost any money. It's openly available to anyone. They do have a paid product that's offered. However, most hackers use the free version, and it comes with an enormous amount of built-in tools. A lot of them are specifically designed just for Windows, Windows Server, Windows 8, Windows 7, and that is why it was so successful and prevalent in 2023 so far. It's because they have attacks and tools that are designed just for these systems. Log4Shell, this is something that affected pretty much anything that used JavaScript. It's not really specific to Windows Server. However, this points out when you're using an end-of-life device, such as network devices, combined with end-of-life server, things like Log4Shell, they may not be able to get patched. If it has to remove files or change the way it interacts with the system, it may not function properly when you're operating in an end-of-life environment. Mimikatz is very powerful as well. It's a dangerous tool, and this is really a highlight when it comes to end of life because this tool has been around for a long time. A lot of security tools will be able to detect when it's deployed and block it. However, if you are using something that's end of life and your security tool no longer will function on it, you're not going to be able to protect yourself against this tool. And essentially what it does is once it's deployed, it grabs all of the user accounts and admin accounts and then shows the username and password in plain text. So if a hacker is able to gain access to a system and deploy this, they will have all of the credentials they need to wreak absolute havoc on your environment. Shell miner is something that is also very commonly used, especially in 2023. This is actually cryptocurrency. So we all know or have heard of cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. And what you can do is you can set up a computer or multiple computers on the internet, and they can help complete transactions in the cryptocurrency chain. Well, hackers said, hey, if we're going to get paid a small commission, instead of going out and buying a bunch of computers to mine or complete these transactions to get a small payout, why don't we just hack a whole bunch of computers and make them mine it for us for free, and then we don't have any upfront cost. And that's what this tool does. It will take over a computer and it will mine cryptocurrency, and then obviously take whatever percentage of the coin it does get paid out, and it transfers it to their wallet. Now, users may not know this is happening. However, you will see a massive performance issue. Computers will be very slow. The network will be slow. It does get detectable if somebody's paying attention or if you have a tool that's able to detect it. However, if you're maintaining an end-of-life server and your security tool won't work anymore on it, it may go undetected. And also the last one, Squibbly-Doo, because they like to use fun names. It's goofy. However, what it can do is not funny at all. It can establish a remote connection to a hacker in which they can now run executions and scripts against your systems or devices. And this was used heavily on server 2008, 2012 here in 2023. All right, here to finish up some of the cybersecurity risk. So I do want to mention when we talk about endpoint detection and response technology, this used to be called an antivirus. So we don't use that term anymore because essentially how an antivirus works on a system is outdated. It just doesn't work anymore. Viruses and malware, they have what's called a fingerprint, just like us humans do. If you go and put your hand on something and leave a fingerprint, that can get traced back to you. They'll know that was your hand that was on that table or cup. Well, viruses and malware have the same thing, and that's how an antivirus would work. It would detect the file, it would check the fingerprint against a database and go, oh, this is bad, let's block it. However, today, malware is known as polymorphic, and what that means is it can change its fingerprint whenever it wants to. So if it pops in and it's noticing it's starting to get blocked, it can change its fingerprint over and over again until it's allowed to run. And that's why a standard antivirus is no longer sufficient today. And EDR, what that does is it not only looks at the fingerprint, but it also looks at the behavior side as well. It watches what the file's doing, what it's accessing, what access it wants to get, what outside or network connections it's making, and it correlates all that data in real time within a second, if not milliseconds, and it determines whether or not that file is legitimate or it needs to be blocked. And that's why it makes them effective. And what allows them to operate this is called the Anti-Malware Scanning Interface, or AMSI. This is something that is included on all Windows servers 2016 and up. This is not on server 2012 or below. So that's very important to notice that you lose a lot of functionality with your EDR because that AMSI interface is not present. And even though it's a third-party tool, they still leverage this service on Windows in order to detect, malicious behavior, scripts going out, network traffic, macros. This is in reference to Microsoft Word or Excel that are enabled with macros. There was a massive breach a few years ago in Italy. It was a city called Foligno. And what happened is when you opened up a special Microsoft Word document, just like you always do when you open up an Office 365 app, the first thing it does is reach out to Microsoft Server, checks your account. If you need to log in, it'll prompt you to log in. Well, what hackers realized is that they could actually modify that sequence, and instead of reaching out to Microsoft to validate credentials, they're actually reaching out to their own malicious web server, and they were able to compromise an entire city in Italy with ransomware, and that's how it was deployed. And anybody who had a robust EDR, even when that came out, this would have detected that act and would have blocked it. It would have said, oh, Microsoft's Word's trying to reach out to a server that it shouldn't be. Let's go ahead and block the action and clean up the file. Living off the land is something that is very common. And what that means is it's essentially a threat actor's in your system for like 18 months. And that's about the average before ransomware is deployed. And living off the land is they're actually behaving in such an inconspicuous way that from a event log or a tools point of view, it looks like they're a valid employee. They're able to blend in with their traffic, their habits, what they're accessing, and everything looks like they are a legitimate staffed employee, except they're obviously not on payroll. And that is, those can get very hard to detect, especially when you're dealing with a threat actor that's very good at what he does. And that's just going to finish up really the importance when we're talking about end of life from a security perspective, and how important it is to keep all of your security tools updated. So now we are going to dig into the business impact. So now this necessarily isn't related to security. However, the security risk can actually cause some of these business impacts, especially when we're talking about downtime. In cybersecurity, we have what's known as the CIA triad, in which, in order to say a system is secure, the data or the systems or the organization must have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And availability obviously is everything's able to run and function. So if your server is down because of a security risk, or because of there's a glitch in the system, there's a service that's not working properly, and Microsoft's is going, hey, we're not going to fix it, and the server goes down, now you've lost availability out of the triad, and now that's when things can get massive business impacts, productivity, data loss, all types of things that go into that. You know, like we use the examples accessing patient records or scheduling appointments can really impact your business. And again, this may not necessarily be related to security. However, you know, security or Windows Server operating systems, they do degrade over time. Servers, they just don't work perfectly through their entire lifespan. They constantly need upkeep and maintenance. And once that's taken away, they degrade very quickly. I know for me, I have zero patience for a slow computer. So decreased server speed and responsiveness, you know, if you're trying to log into your computer and it takes 2 to 3 minutes for your login to actually complete, and because your server is just overloaded or has a very slow response time, that's actually going to add up. If you're looking at even just a handful of employees, if they're spending an extra couple minutes waiting every time they need to perform an action on the domain, that can add up very quickly, really affecting productivity across the organization. And this is kind of the same thing for data access. If you're trying to get information out, but the server is just running at 100% utilization, services are just crashing, it won't load certain modules anymore, that's really going to affect on your ability to really take care of your patients or handle the administrative side in regards to your patients. And that's not really an enjoyable workplace for anybody. And that can just create a domino effect of bad news all the way down. And then finally, network performance issues. Like I said, nobody wants to work on a slow computer. Nobody wants to work on a slow network. And that's really what an end-of-life server is going to lead to. As I said, it's going to constantly degrade over time without any type of maintenance or patches. And that's going to lead to a very noticeable network performance. All right, so this is a kind of from an IT side, but obviously it's going to affect everybody, the entire organization, including the end user. And this is lack of vendor support. And this is really the biggest one. So if there is an issue and you're trying to get something fixed, or your IT is trying to get something fixed, Microsoft's not really going to be there anymore to help you out. As of now, with Server 2022 or 2019, you can go to Microsoft and say, hey, this is not working the way it's supposed to. Can you guys help us figure this out? They're going to go, yeah, no, sure. But if they're going, oh, you're on 2012, you're going to need to upgrade. We fixed that in the next one. You know, that's going to be something. Actually, any software vendor, they love to say that. Oh, yeah, that got fixed in the new version. You have to upgrade. Limited community and online resources. So this refers to more to open source information, which is a huge benefit for IT and also cybersecurity. Open source intelligence is a really big part of like our security and what we use. And unfortunately, you're going to go on to these community resources, or your IT is, to try and get help or troubleshoot, or having a weird issue maybe that affects a specialized software that you use. and maybe that's what's the issue is, you're not going to be able, you're going to have a difficult time getting help when you're maintaining something that's end of life. Because like I mentioned before, nobody's going to waste time or resources focusing on something that the provider, Microsoft, is not even going to support anymore. Complex troubleshooting. So I mentioned about like the server degrading over time. This can really create weird, unique, complex issues that maybe is very unique to that individual device. And getting a solution may not be plausible, or the cost of getting that solution, as far as man hours or labor that's involved on researching and troubleshooting, can really go high. And use yourself as an organization, you might think like, maybe we don't actually want to pay or allocate resources troubleshooting something that honestly we shouldn't even have on our network in the first place. Let's go ahead and analyze getting it replaced, and then we don't have to stress or stay up or lose sleep on trying to resolve a complex issue. And finally, the loss of IT expertise. And this is, I don't want to sound rude, but this is something that IT guys like myself and girls, they look at this and they go, hey, my free time is valuable to me. I don't have a lot of it. So we have to pick and choose on what we focus our training on. If there's something that we want to get better at, or something that our clients need us to get better at, that's where our focus is going to go. We're not going to spend that time trying to figure out weird or unique issues on something that's end of life that Microsoft doesn't support. If Microsoft's not supporting it, that means we're losing a massive amount of education and learning and documentation to help resolve issues. Microsoft is a paid product, which means their software is protected at its core. So nobody has access to the core of Windows. We can't go in and look at the coding to figure out an issue like you could with an open source software. So really, loss of IT expertise is detrimental to an organization. All right, well, hopefully, if you guys are sick of my voice, good news. I'm gonna go ahead and pass this over to Mark. He is our Director of MSP Pro Solutions, and he's actually gonna show you the light at the tunnel after I gave everybody terrible news and hopefully didn't stress anybody out, but provided good material. But Mark's gonna go ahead and discuss your options in regards to end-of-life server 2012.
Thank you, Nick. Great stuff right there. So let's go over what options you may have to get rid of this server 2012. In order to avoid all the risks that Lindsay and Nick have mentioned here today, you have two main options. First option is migrate. You can migrate your servers to a cloud-based platform like Microsoft Azure. The other main option would be to upgrade or replace. You can upgrade your existing servers to a newer version of Windows, such as Server 2016, 2019, 2022. This will pertain more if it's a virtual server rather than a physical server. Quick explanation of virtual server versus physical server. A physical server is what you see in your IT room or closet, taking up space, making noise, raising your electricity. Versus a virtual server is just that. It's a virtualized version of a physical server and no hardware. Virtual servers can either run from a physical server itself or from the cloud. Now, server with 2012 is on a physical server. Most likely, it's probably over 5 years old, and it poses additional risks like hardware failure, performance degradation, and it should be replaced altogether. But we'll go over that process in more detail in a bit. Aside from those two options, there could be special cases where maybe the affected server only runs maybe your EHR software, and you can move it to our DIS cloud hosting platform. Or maybe the server has legacy software on it that simply can't be upgraded past 2012. What do you do then? If that's the case, we can come up with a plan and isolate that server to only have local access and block the outside threats from it. So that way you can access your data from any legacy software that it might have. So on the next slide here, we have upgrade, replace, or migrate. Oh my. You may be thinking, well, what's the best option for me? Let's go over each option in more detail. Migrating to the Azure cloud. This is where the contents of your server, either physical or virtual, will be transferred to the cloud, and you would access that server over your existing. Doing this include no upfront hardware costs, no power, highly scalable and flexible to meet your specific requirements. You're not overpaying now to account for the future, but rather turning the dial little by little to only pay for what you need at the moment. OpEx as opposed to CapEx. Upgrading. The server is a virtual server. A new one can be created with an updated operating system. Of course, preferably 2022, but some softwares only have limitations to go to 2016 or 2019, depending on that. And contents and functions can be transferred to it. If there's a business critical software on the server, we would need to do a proper discovery with that software vendor to ensure it's compatible with whatever newer operating system we put on there. Also, we have replacing. This is going to pertain to physical servers and purchasing new hardware with an updated operating system to replace it. If the decision is to not move to the cloud, this would be your alternative. It would involve a complete migration of data, applications, and configurations from the old one to the new one, and this would be a CapEx cost. So what path do I take, you say? Well, in summary, the decision to upgrade, replace, or migrate from the end of life 2012 server really depends on your organization's specific needs, resources, and long-term IT strategy. All approaches have their advantages and drawbacks, and it's crucial to assess your unique circumstances and priorities to make an informed choice. So, how do you decide? Well, DAS can help. We're here. Really, the best option is going to vary. It's going to be based on the following: budget. How much can you allocate to spend on upgrading or migrating your servers? Is the OpEx model more appealing than that of a CapEx model? If the OpEx model is better for you, inquiring about the Azure cloud is definitely the way to go. If you're okay with this model and you want to incur the upfront cost of a new physical server and you like having that in your organization of having a physical server there, by all means, that's good. Time frame. Are there any dependencies that are reliant upon a timely migration? Sometimes software vendors will give you a timeline and say, well, we're not going to support your software anymore at this time because you're on 2012. There might be a time frame there that we have to do this sooner rather than later. Complexity. How many servers do you have? How complex are their workloads? And then finally, goals. What are your business objectives? How can a newer operating system or a cloud platform help you achieve them? DAS can help you make that informed decision, and we can assess your current situation and recommend the best solution for your needs and help you with implementation process as your trusted IT provider.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for that information. I know it was a lot, but the repercussions are real, and as you can tell, we have a plan that can fit every practice's needs to make sure you don't remain on a 2012 server. However, as promised, we're not done just yet. We do have an expert panel discussion. So I'm going to bring Mark and Nick back into the conversation and moderate some questions from our current client base, as well as any ones that you have on the call today. So, again, feel free to put those in the questions area of the control panel. But let's go ahead and jump in to kick us off here. So, Mark, I'm hoping you can elaborate a little bit more on the time frame to completion for replacing or migrating that server. So kind of basically, how long will this take from start to finish?
Sure. Replacing a physical server could take anywhere from 30 to 75 days with the proper planning and migration, where an Azure cloud migration could range a little shorter, probably 15 to 45 days, depending on the data.
Awesome, thank you. And kind of going to jump in again as a follow-up to that. Will there be any downtime while this is being implemented?
There could possibly be some downtime, and again, that's going to depend on the path chosen and the contents that are going to be migrated. But we do try to avoid any downtime at all if it's at all possible.
Understood. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And we do have a question, it looks like, for you, Nick, but Mark, of course, feel free to jump in here. So what are, if any, the security advantages of moving to the cloud versus an on-prem server?
Yeah, it's a great question. We get this question a lot. And essentially, there's 2 points to look at. First, the software itself, the Windows Server, is the same whether it's on a physical device or in the cloud. That server software is the same. So all the security features are there, the configurations are there. Where the cloud excels at is because when it's located in the cloud, it's almost a cloud web portal or dashboard. It comes with a ton of granular security controls of how to access that server or how to access those resources. Whereas when you're talking about an on-prem physical device, it's either yes or no. If you want to give somebody access to something, they're going to get like full access to everything. And it really takes a lot of work to try to, pick apart or do a custom role. Whereas Azure Cloud, for example, they have hundreds of roles already predefined, and then you can customize your own or create your own roles to your specific needs. So when we're talking about access controls, which is a very important for general cybersecurity altogether, not just in HIPAA, the cloud has a massive advantage over the on-prem or physical device.
Awesome. Okay, great information. Clearly a lot to consider here when deciding on your transition strategy. I guess we have a clear favorite over here. Now, same thing. I think this one would actually go to Mark. But or can we comment on or give a general idea of the costs associated or involved with migrating versus replacing a server?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, it's really just an OpEx versus CapEx decision. Do you want to put the upfront costs up, or is a monthly model better for you? In round numbers, obviously things vary all the time. But Azure Cloud, to put everything in the Azure Cloud, would be a monthly cost ranging from anywhere from $200 to it could be $1,000 a month. But that's that would be an environment that has a lot of stuff in it. Replacing the server, that's where you have to get into, do you have the budget for an upfront cost? And that could range anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000, depending on the needs of the power and performance that the server needs.
Absolutely. No, thanks for going over that. I know that was likely a question maybe on everyone's mind. But again, with the HIPAA penalties at risk, or just the cost of a data breach itself, that's understandable. So again, back to you, Nick, from what I'm seeing here. What if we have, and maybe this could be, Mark, it could be wrong, but what if we have a specialized software that requires Windows 2012 operating system? So can you expand on maybe, I guess, Nick, what this might mean, and maybe provide an example for everyone still on?
Yeah, absolutely. Mark did kind of mention this a little bit, very briefly. Essentially, what you'd want to do is, if you're using a server that's kind of running all of your important services for the organization, and then you also have a specialized software, say like an X-ray imaging software on that, and your vendor who supplies that X-ray software says, you know what, we only made this for Windows Server 2012. We don't offer any support for the newer versions. From a business standpoint, that puts you in quite the situation, because it's like, all right, well, we need to focus on security. However, we also have to focus on our business as well, and it's not practical to upgrade or change vendors. So what you can do is you can take all of your key services off that server, put them on a brand new up-to-date server like 2012 or 2022 or 2019, like your Active Directory, any other software vendors that do support later Windows versions, and then have that 2012 server just for that specialized vendor, and then isolate it. And when we say isolate it, that means it's on its own network. None of the other computers can get to it except for ones that actually have to. And then you can also ensure that that server doesn't have contact with the outside world, unless it's something like it reports information for reporting to the software vendor, or it integrates with a cloud dashboard. that can get isolated to only those external sources and everything else would be blocked. So it's still not, there's still a security risk involved. However, we can take steps to mitigate the impact as much as possible if needed.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for your expertise. We just have a few key takeaways, and depending on time, we can maybe revisit questions from those on the call today and make sure we address them all. So what do you need to walk away from this presentation with today? And to put it frankly, you need to know that end of life for Windows Server 2012 signifies, right, the end of official support and security updates provided by Microsoft. But really, you know, honing in on what, you know, Nick and Mark covered here is that there are both security risks and business continuity risks at play here. I mean, let's not forget about HIPAA compliance, right? And all the implications that come along with it. Obviously, Nick had so much information for us on the cybersecurity attacks and vulnerabilities and the risks associated in that area as well. But also what Nick mentioned with the end user impact. I mean, we're talking speed, daily operations. What if your staff couldn't print, you know, and so much more that could really impact, you know, not only the security, but daily operations that you're seeing at your current practice. So again, that was a lot of information, but if you are overwhelmed or you're worried you may be on Windows 2012, we are here to help. You know, just a quick call out too for those who aren't familiar with DAS and maybe you missed our intro here. Please visit our website, connect with us on LinkedIn, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. We actually post all of our historical webinars on our YouTube channel. And if you are a current DAS MSP client, you would have actually received a support alert earlier this year and again in October notifying you of your 2012 server status. Although these could have gotten, you know, caught up in spam or maybe they went to the wrong contact. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you aren't sure. And whether you're a client or not, you know, we're putting out a call of action to all practices, not to let your 2012 server take down your practice. Let us help explore your options with you to make sure your patient's data is safe, but also your providers are compliant. So we've got about 2 minutes here for any last minute questions that come through. And if for any reason you do have to jump off, please don't hesitate to reach out to your DAS account manager to learn more about your specific practice's current state. Or if you don't have an account manager, maybe you just aren't sure where to start or who to reach out to. Mark's email is up there along with his great photo. And you know, feel free to reach out to him and see what we can do and how we can assist. So it looks like we do have one question remaining in our chat from earlier. And this one will definitely be for Nick. It looks like, does this impact cybersecurity insurance?
So yeah, that would be a great question for your insurance provider or broker. But what I can share is we do assist our clients with cybersecurity insurance questionnaires from the technical standpoints. You know, do we have this? Do you offer this? You know, how do we answer this question? We do see on every single one, it asks, do you have end-of-life software present in your organization? So if you are maintaining a Windows Server 2012, that would be a yes. And then the next question is going to usually be, is it isolated, or what other controls have you put in place to mitigate the risk? The impact as far as the cost or the premium, that would be determined by your broker or the insurance provider. But we do see that question on every single cybersecurity insurance questionnaire that we've helped our clients assist with this year in 2023. It's been on every single one.
Wow. Great. Thank you for sharing and thank you for asking that question. That was a great point out. All right, well, that is all that's coming in. So I know you guys were super thorough for us today. I think we probably covered everyone's outstanding questions. I just want to take a second to thank everyone for taking time out of your busy days to join us. And thank you, Mark and Nick and everyone. Have a great rest of your day and your week.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.